Welcome to the Blueprint Podcast, where we throw out the old blueprint so you can become who you were always meant to be. I'm your host, Jason Smith, and if you haven't already, make sure you click the subscribe button and share this podcast with your friends on social media and tag me in it at JBirdFit. Today, I have a very special guest for you, Trey Tucker. Trey is a licensed professional counselor and founder of Rugged Counseling. He works primarily with young men and young adults, helping them navigate relationships, mental health, career transitions, and the deeper patterns that shape who they're becoming. His approach is practical, honest, and deeply rooted in faith and resilience. Trey's also built a community of over 1.4 million followers across social media, where he speaks with clarity and conviction to a generation looking for direction. In today's conversation, we'll get into the real challenges men are facing, from anxiety to modern dating and mentorship, and what it actually looks like to step into maturity with purpose. Trey Tucker, welcome to the Blueprint Podcast.
Thank you. It's awesome to be here with you.
Yeah, I'm really glad to have you. I've followed your content for a long time, and then I stopped following, not because your content was bad, but because I didn't want your voice to impact mine. And I feel like you and I are very much on the same page with a lot of different things in the way that we create our content and the way that we look at some of the social issues that are going on right now with young men and boys. Your latest episode of the Rugged Podcast with guest Will Honeycutt is exactly what was needed right now for men. I was hoping you could tell us a little bit about that episode and what your greatest takeaway was from that.
Yeah, I've known Will for probably 10 years at least. And just in the last couple of years, I've actually started learning about some of his history with his friend group. He went to Vanderbilt when he was a freshman. He came from California. He knew nobody. But within the first 3 or 4 weeks, one of his professors said, "Hey, here's what I did with my friend groups." I said, "Hey, why don't we start meeting once a week?" And I took a risk, and it was awkward. So the professor said that to him as a freshman, and Will thought, all right, I'm going to do it. If for whatever reason that what the professor said resonated with him. And he took 3 or 4 guys that he knew. He didn't know them in any depth, but he knew them well enough to know that, like, I think I could tolerate them on a weekly basis. And he said, "This is awkward. Do you want to meet with me once a week to talk about life?" And so he just put it out there. There's no smooth way of saying that. But I love how courageous he was, especially as an 18-year-old, because he knew he wanted deep friendships, and he knew there was more than just what we would think of as like the typical college experience or what you're quote unquote supposed to live like in college. And these friends said yes. And long story short, they all still meet every week 39 years later. They all decided to move to the same city after they graduated, and now they do life together. They push each other. They hold each other accountable. They know each other's families intimately. If one of them is having some sort of a difficulty in their marriage, the other guys swoop in whatever way is necessary, because they've given each other full access to each other's lives to speak into that. They don't get defensive, or at least they try not to, because they know, look, we need this, we need each other in order to be sharpened as much as possible, because you know this, we're on the same page. The world is going to try to dull you into just getting into cruise control and settling. But that friend group, I'm jealous of it, because I have awesome friends, but I don't have a group like that knows each other really well and meets on that regular basis.
It wasn't just that. What really got me was the ability to be witnessed and not rejected.
Yeah.
Is so huge. And we all have our friend groups and the people that we enjoy and we spend time with, but we don't know them on that level. We don't often take the time or even have the time with all, just how complicated and complex life can be sometimes, to be able to sit with people in that way and to make that level of space for one another. I just think it's so huge. And I got chills as I was listening to the episode, because I'm like, oh man, how awesome would that be to be able to meet week by week with a group of people and have that same type of friendship.
Oh, I'm with you. And I'm still not as good at this as I want to be. It took me, so in the episode, Will talked about a secret that he had kept for 20 years. And he didn't say on the episode what it was, but it took him 20 years to actually come out and say it to this group. And he said it and he thought, all right, this is it. They're going to walk away. Because that's all of, especially guys, that's our fear, is if I open up and I show you the real me, you're going to run away. But he did it. And not only did they not run away, they actually got closer to him. And I keep having to learn that lesson, because I grew up thinking I got to look like I've got it all together. and that I don't have any struggles and no worries. So it was me, but I was projecting this like what I thought was perfected version of me. And what I realized was like, I wasn't getting deep with anybody. Nobody really knew me. They just knew the sterilized version of me. And the real me was starving behind the scenes as the sterilized version or sanitized version of me was out there. So yeah, that part of the story was definitely huge. And I'm still trying to get better myself.
And what do you think it was for him that really blocked him from being able to say it out loud, why he held on to it for as long as he did?
All of us have this voice in our head, and it's called I'm a therapist, so I'm going to use the official term. The official term is shame. But that voice tells us, like, you're terrible. Nobody is going to want to know you. Nobody's going to want to be around you if they knew all this stuff about you. And the problem is everybody has that voice in our heads, and everybody has something in our past, at least one thing that we're afraid that we'll get rejected over it. But it's a self-protective measurement, really, because when we can get as deep or as shallow into this as you want, we can geek out. But like, our brains are really designed just to keep us safe. They don't care if we're happy. They don't care really if we've got a nice place to live. They just want to keep us alive. And it sees not just physical danger, but also emotional rejection as some sort of a life threat. We know logically that getting rejected by somebody isn't literally going to kill us, but man, it still hurts. And so our brain sees any kind of pain as something that could eventually kill us. So it's always scanning for possible threats, like what might kill us, what might kill us. And you think about public speaking, that's people's worst fear in surveys. So like,
Absolutely.
And it's even a worse fear than dying. I think Seinfeld even had a joke. He said, like, when you go to a funeral, the people that are speaking at the funeral are probably more afraid to be in their position than to be in the coffin at the funeral itself. But it's that idea of, we know public speech isn't actually going to kill us, but there's that part of our brain whose job it is to make sure that any threat gets at least noticed, if not dealt with. And so shame, it actually has a healthy place in us because it's trying to give us a heads up. Dude, don't open up to everybody, which is good. But we also have to tell that shame voice, hey, thanks for helping. And I got to open up to somebody because I can't just keep everything hidden all the time.
It's so interesting that you mentioned public speaking, because that is one of the places where I struggle a lot. And what's interesting about that is when I was younger, I used to sing. So I was in different choirs and sang the national anthem in front of a bunch of people. But when we get into public speaking, where you're in this place where you have to formulate an idea, you have to present it to the public, there's that opportunity where you're going to be grossly rejected or made wrong, or you slip up, you say the wrong word. And you get into your head about that, where it's, oh man, now I'm going to be witnessed. But it also tests you, and it tests your ideas, and it actually makes you better. It makes you sharper. It makes you more capable, competent, and confident in who you are as a person the more that you do it. So you have to break free from the shame or the guilt or the fear or the feelings of anxiousness that go along with it, and just allow yourself to ease into it and keep doing it.
Yeah, and it shocks me to know that you had the fear of public speaking. I had no idea. Like, you've certainly overcome it, but you're saying you did it by slowly easing into it. Is that right?
Well, I'm in the process of. What's interesting is when you do the job of a police officer, you're going into the public in different places at different levels of society every day. You're trying to navigate some of people's deepest, darkest problems in the moment. You get really good at being able to speak to the public, but what you don't do is get up on a stage in front of a bunch of people that are there to see either you or a group of people that are very similar to you, and then to present them with something that's supposed to be really valuable to them in that moment, something that they really need to hear. I haven't done that yet. So there's that anticipation anxiety that comes along with that am I prepared to actually step up on a stage and be able to do that? And the answer is, I don't really know.
Yeah,
I think I could, but I'm going to have to do it and find out and see how bad it is.
And that's the thing. I've just had to give myself some grace. Like, the first time I try something, it's going to be bad because that's how life works. There are so few people and so few activities that I've ever heard of somebody just trying something brand new and being awesome at it. So I'm like, no, this is part of the process. I don't know if you do this, but I leave my first ever social media video up because I'm so bad. And
it's all bad.
Yeah. I want to remind myself of the growth that I've got. Not that I'm somehow fantastic at it now, but I've at least come a longer way than I thought I would. And I want to show other people, hey, let's show our process of here I started awful, and now if I'm decent, then now you see that it was a road. It wasn't just instantaneous results.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I actually like looking back at those every now and then, again, just like as the reminder that, oof, that was so horrible. But look what you've done in 2.5 years. And so and what you're doing in that moment is actually celebrating a win, right? You did something difficult, something you've never done before. You challenged yourself and you became better in that process. You learned how to navigate video as well as all the comment sections and everything else that you've gone through and experienced. And it can be really difficult. People can be really cruel, especially, and it seems to be if you're like in the 2,000 follower range, it's awful, right? Or not awful. It's a little bit supportive.
Right.
You get to the 10K range, then you start getting the trolls. Then that 10K to 100K, it's just like they're hammering down on you, testing you every step of the way to make sure that you are who you say you are. And then, finally, when you get into that 200 plus, they seem to leave you alone for the most part, except when you're live.
Yeah, it's like they got nothing better to do.
No, they don't. You're bald. Yeah, I am actually.
I didn't realize.
You're old. Yeah, thanks.
I didn't realize any of this. But what do you want to know? They'll tell you.
Yeah.
And, but you talk about it like, whether it's some of the haters in the comments or just the progress you've made on video, like the idea is that we repped it out. And no matter what it is, whatever the venture is, it's just about getting your reps in, and eventually you're going to grow. And if you don't grow, that's okay. You've figured out like, all right, this ain't for me. I'll switch to something that is. But I think I've had to just keep reminding myself that 10 reps ain't going to get it. 100 reps probably ain't going to get it. It's probably going to be something more like 500 or 1,000 until I finally start feeling like I'm making progress with it. But whether it's comments in the videos or making a speech that maybe doesn't go as well as we think, like that's all developing thicker skin, because it goes back to that voice in our head. Like, all right, if you do this and it doesn't go perfect, then like you might die. And it's still that voice that's trying to convince us of that. But if we rep it out enough, we can start to have a little conversation with that voice that says, all right, I see what you're trying to do and I appreciate you, but I've got all this evidence that I've made it through a bunch of stuff that I quote unquote failed at, and I didn't die. So I'm probably going to be all right this time. So I'll even tell that shame voice, like if I'm nervous before a speech and it's trying to convince me, basically, you're not ready, don't do it. I'm like, all right, I'm as ready as I'm going to be. So come on with me. You can come watch, but you're not going to stop me. Feel free to hang out. So like sometimes that's how we have to deal with that voice.
And this is like my greatest fear right here about public speaking, is that I'm going to start and it might start out great. The intro goes smoothly and then you forget what you were going to say and you completely lose everything in the moment.
Yep.
How do you deal with that?
I'm to the point now where I've realized if I show my weaknesses, people are actually going to like me more.
Yeah.
And if I forget something or I lose my train of thought, I'll be like, I wrote this speech and I still can't remember it. I'll just try to make a little joke out of it. I forget who I was seeing a concert a couple of years ago, and dude forgot the lyrics, and it was a hit song. Like everybody in the crowd knew the lyrics and he forgot them. I wrote the dang thing. You'd think I know them. So I just try to make fun of myself, and everybody in the crowd knows their own flaws and how messed up or broken they know they are. So I'm the only one that's expecting perfection out of me. So I've just learned, usually within reason, if I can show that I'm pretty messed up too, then people can identify with that more. They can't really identify with perfection.
Now, when you go into public speaking, are you speaking mostly to cold audiences, or do they know who you are prior and they expect to have a certain result from the speaking engagement?
It's a mix, actually. There's probably 50-50 of cold, and at least the other half, if they don't know me necessarily, they at least know that I'm a therapist and I'm a dude. And so they have at least a preconceived notion of what they're going to get. But if I'm coming in totally cold, I've got to at least try to like make a few little jokes to help things warm up a little bit. Cause there's an initial, you can feel it in the room. There's an initial, they're not necessarily sitting there with their arms crossed, but the energy is there of like, all right, you better impress me, boy. I'm wasting my time if not.
Nice. Now, your work focuses on the unique challenges that young men face today. From your perspective, what are the most significant mental health struggles that you're seeing in that demographic?
Anxiety, far and away anxiety. And that's with women as well. If you just look at
Yeah.
stats, it's anxiety is something like, especially for men, I think it's going to be like one in four, maybe 1 in 5 men are going to at least be diagnosed or going to be diagnosed with anxiety. But the people who are actually diagnosed, that's a much smaller number than the people who actually deal with anxiety. So my guess is all the different people that actually deal with anxiety that never go in to actually get therapy for it, just anecdotally, I'm going to say it's probably somewhere in the 60% range. That's just my guess from conversations along with some of the research. But yeah, that's far and away for guys, especially guys in their 20s. I always tell them, look, you're in the toughest part of a man's life when you're in your early 20s because so much is changing. You've graduated either high school or college. You are probably changing cities. You're changing friend groups. You're getting a job. Everything's new. Everything takes an adjustment, and our brains can only handle so much adjusting at once. So you just get flooded with all this stuff. And it's probably, I bet, at least a third of my clients come to me in that frame of mind, in that stage of life. It's like, all right, I'm 22, I'm 23. What do I do with all this new stuff? So anxiety, adjusting a new life stage. Depression is definitely up there, but it's usually connected to something else. They often won't come in and say, I think I'm depressed, that they're struggling with a specific part of their life or situation. And then trauma has really been talked about a lot lately, thanks to social media. Some people are overusing that term where we're saying, I have a flat tire this morning, so I have trauma. No, you don't. Life is just hard sometimes. Sorry. So there is plenty of trauma out there, but I'm careful to use that word with people. I use some other language just to make sure we don't take on a victim mentality.
No, that's really good. And I'm always encouraging people to stop identifying with the amount of labels, whether it's diagnosed or self-diagnosed, however you came across it. It's great to have some of these labels in the very beginning of whatever it is that you're going through. You're in a journey of self-discovery. You decided to go see a therapist. That's wonderful. I love that. You start spending some time with them and they reach some results early on of maybe what we think is going on or what's happening inside. And then we get this label, and it's much like when anxious attachers find the book Attached by Amir Levine, right? It's oh, this is amazing. This is everybody in my life. Look at all this stuff. I read the whole book. Now I'm healed and everybody else needs to be fixed. And you're avoidant and you're a narcissist, and slow your roll, hold up for a second, right? Let's really dive deep into this and start to figure out, well, this is just how you build and cultivate relationships with other people, but also the relationship you have with yourself. So this becomes really good information to know thyself, to understand who you are, where you're going, what you're doing, and the why behind why you're doing it. So do you have to wear that label as a badge of honor, like a Girl Scout or a Boy Scout that just got their patch? Hey, Mom, I just got my anxious attacher badge. Look at that. I'm curious your thoughts on this.
No, you're so right. And some of the most obnoxious people I've ever met are the people who are in the process of healing through therapy because they're not fully finished with the process yet. So they haven't really gotten that last part of, okay, now you've grown. Now let's teach you how to look at other people through a lens of grace, knowing that they haven't learned what you've learned. It's not necessarily making them bad or irresponsible or narcissistic or anything like that. It's just they haven't reached that crisis point. Because usually if somebody's going to come into a counselor, they've reached a point where everything else they were trying wasn't working. Usually we try to work in our own minds and maybe with some tools that we know through like journaling or meditation or listening to podcasts or whatever. Then if those don't really work, we go to our friends. Then if those don't really work, then sometimes we start to look for a therapist. So when somebody reaches that point, like they're hungry, they're ready to grow for the most part. But then they start to, like you said, they start to get their labels and they identify as whatever it is that they think they've been diagnosed as, and they get all judgy. And yeah, it drives me nuts. So there's a long way of saying, no, if somebody has really done the work, they're not only going to be aware of themselves and have come through a lot of stuff, but they're also going to treat other people with more respect, more dignity, more grace, because you don't know what you don't know. And until I reached I've had multiple kind of hell moments that brought me to my knees, but until I reached my first one, I didn't know what I needed to work on. I had no idea what was in there. And then life just pulverized me to the point and it showed me like, oh crap, I got to deal with this. So until somebody has that moment, you can't just assume that they're sitting there just happy in their toxicity.
And you touched on something really important, a lot of things, actually. Again, it's a journey of self-discovery. So you had a moment, you felt pulverized by that moment. This is where we began to cultivate our growth and our resilience and the capacity for difficulty and uncertainty. You start building yourself up so that when you have this problem or issue or concern that gets presented to you again, or maybe in a different way, a year later, 2 years later, 10 years later, you might sit there and say, oh, but I'm healed because I already went through that. And it's now it's going to present it to you again. But guess what? You've now cultivated the capacity internally to be able to navigate that situation just a little bit differently and acknowledge it in the moment where you can say, okay, I can get through this because I've done this before. So something that used to take you 2 weeks to regulate yourself, now you're maybe in a couple hours because, yeah, that really sucked. And I'm really irritated with that. And that pissed me off, but I'm good. I can make it through this. We're going to get through this.
Yeah, like you work out and I work out, and I'm sure there are types of workouts or movements in the weight room that used to maybe make you puke. I know there were movements that made me puke. And when I first did them, it was horrible. But as I kept doing them, I'm like, okay, this is still a challenge, but it doesn't affect me like it used to. So that's exactly your point. It's like life's going to throw you more stuff and you got to become stronger to handle what it's going to continue to throw. Because I don't know of anybody that's got an easy life. And we're under this misconception that like, if I can hit all my goals and get the job that I want and the family that I want, then I can just have an easy life. I'm like, you might achieve an easy life, but tell me how fulfilled you are once you get to that point. But because we got to just keep getting stronger. There's so many different ways we could go with this, but there's an index card on my refrigerator and it says H5, don't rebuild. And I'm the only one that really knows what that means. If somebody comes into my house, they look at it like it's some weird code, but what it means is hell 5. In other words, there have been 5 times in my life that for me at least have been hell on earth. And I had a role to play in all 5 of those. Some of them were completely my fault. Some of them mostly weren't my fault, but I at least had a role to play. So I've learned, at least in those 5 ways, here's how I built or at least contributed to that hell on earth experience. I don't want to rebuild in those 5 areas. Now, there's plenty of things that are going to come at me that I have no idea about, and I don't want to know because it would just probably overwhelm me to the point of having a heart attack. But I at least know these are areas where I have a propensity for messing up. And so that index card reminds me like, okay, I'm stronger now because of these things. And I also know the behaviors to avoid so that I don't re-experience them.
I love that you mentioned that you take ownership and responsibility for your role in that circumstance. Yeah. How can somebody who's going through hell in that moment begin to take accountability actually in real time for what's happening?
They need to first realize the benefits of it, because sometimes taking responsibility gets preached as you should do this, you need to do this, and nobody really explains why. I shouldn't say nobody. There are some people that explain why. But the benefit of taking ownership is that you realize, okay, I can actually control something. I can't control everything because true control is just a myth, but there's at least a few things in this chaos that I can wrap my hands around and say, all right, here's what I'm changing, or at least here's what I'm never doing again. And just taking that part of the ownership of it, that slice of the pie, it gives you confidence and it gives you a sense of peace, knowing that, okay, there's this part of the pie, if we're dealing with the pie chart graph, that I will never be able to control, but here's the slice that I can control. All right, bring it on. Like, I don't know what's coming, but I at least know generally how to get through it this time.
I always like to remind myself that I can't control what's going on, but I do have the power to influence what's going on. And that influence comes by the way that I'm showing up in this moment. And so it's an ability for me to check myself in the moment, like a pattern interrupt, to zoom out, step back and assess the situation, what's happening, what's going on. And it took me 47 years to get to this point, and I'm still not good at it. But in the moments where you can, it's such a gift that you not only give to yourself, but to the other people that are involved in that situation, to be able to check yourself in the moment and to recognize that, yes, I can influence this by doing something different within myself, by my reaction, by it's the power of the pause, by actually stopping in the moment and then choosing my second thought as opposed to going with that first one that's so easy.
Yes. Oh my goodness. That's got me in trouble so often, just going that reaction rather than a response.
Yeah.
But
Because it is easy because it's just, oh yeah, watch this. And you're like, nope,
yeah,
don't do it.
that's it. That's it. I tell people we are complex. We're so complex on just if you look at our body parts, there's thousands of body parts that work together. And if we had some sort of a machine that could look into our souls, we're incredibly complex in there. So there's a part in us that wants to lash out. And if you've ever seen the movie Inside Out, they do a really good job of actually representing a lot of the parts that are in us. So there is that anger part whose job it is to lash out at whatever it is that we think is the problem or the threat. And it has a place. We can't ever smush anger fully because we shouldn't, because anger has a really good role in times. But we also have other parts that can help to quell anger in the moment, where we do give that actual thoughtful response after we pause for a second rather than just letting that anger part take over.
Yeah. When you mentioned the different parts, it just reminds me of your podcast episode where you were talking about your RDL form. And that resonated with me so much because I've been doing it wrong the entire time as well. So yeah.
It was so humbling. I don't know what your mechanical flaw was, but like it was so humbling when because just to give y'all context, one of my episodes was with a friend of mine who's a strength coach, and he was training me one day, watching my RDL form, and I thought like I was doing this pretty well. I was keeping my knees where they need to be, my arms, my shoulders, everything felt fine. I wasn't in any pain, and I was actually coaching other guys to do RDLs, so I could pretty much coach it pretty well. But then after about 3 reps, he goes, "Wait, put the weight down, stop." I'm like, what did I do? And it turns out that I was using my lower back more than I should have. It wasn't like egregious, so I probably wouldn't have even noticed it if I had seen it in the mirror, but he knew what to look for and saw like, all right, there's a massive flaw here. And he's right, the lower part of my back is overdeveloped in terms of the muscle mass just because I was using it more than my hamstrings. But the concept was like, I thought I was training my hamstrings, but really I was mostly training my lower back, and I never would have known that until somebody outside of me pointed it out.
And how huge is that if we can take that constructive criticism from others?
Yes.
And then all of a sudden you're completely re-engaged with your hamstrings and you can feel them working in the way that they're supposed to. And you're like, this actually feels a lot better.
Yeah. Yeah. I was so happy he said it. And maybe, I don't know, I'm not sure when I started getting better at receiving criticism. I wish it were sooner, but at whatever point in my life I wasn't good at receiving criticism, I probably would have listened to him, but I would have probably had some resentment. Like, why are you telling me this? I know how to teach this. But now I'm like, nah, if you see something wrong, tell me. I don't care what it is. And not everybody deserves that place in your life, by the way. Somebody has to earn that place, but he's one of those people that has. And thank God he did, because who knows, I could have ripped the back muscle out if I kept doing it for a few more years like I had done it. But yeah,
we get in our 50s, that's a bad day.
That's right. That could be the last day of weight room ever. But yeah, we got to have enough humility and take ourselves not so seriously to actually be okay when somebody points something out. It goes back to that story of Will with his friend group. It's, all right, here I am. I'm opening myself up on purpose to y'all. If you're going to run away, that's fine. But if you're going to stay, now I need you to tell me when I'm stepping out of line, or just when I say something or do something that just could be a little bit better. It doesn't have to be some massive area. It could just be a little tweak.
Now, we've touched on this a little bit already, but I want to highlight the impact of past trauma on young adults. How does this trauma specifically manifest in young men, and why might it be particularly difficult for them to address?
Mostly because they don't know it's there. And I'm going to use the phrase little t traumas, because big T traumas, this is how we talk about it in the therapy world. Big T traumas are reserved for the massive stuff like abuse or violence or just the horrific stuff of life. And a few of us probably have big T traumas, but all of us have little t traumas. And those are the moments where we had a parent who maybe wasn't present or wasn't as present as they could have been, or maybe they didn't do their own work, so they weren't as loving as they should have been, or maybe you got rejected in elementary school and you didn't even realize that it was actually affecting the way that you interact with people now. Or maybe you failed at a sport in one particular moment and your brain just took the meaning of we can never fail at anything again because that was embarrassing and people are going to think we're terrible. Like all those little moments that have to do with fear or pain, they can often affect our brains like wet cement, especially in those first 10 years of our lives. Like our brains are always changeable, but in those first 10 years, when they're the most changeable. So the moments that happen, even if they weren't major moments to us, they had a much greater impact on us than even something major that might have happened in our teenage years. But we can go back and we can look at, okay, what were the more painful or more fearful moments in those years, and how might they be connected to why I do things in the present moment? And that's really where you have to start is like, why do I do what I do now? Why do I respond to certain ways? Why do I interact in certain ways with certain people? You can usually find clues about it from those first 10 years. And then if you can find those root moments, then you can actually find a pattern of, oh yeah, that type of thing kept happening. And it kept confirming that message that my brain took away of, yeah, you better be perfect from now on, because if not, everybody will reject you. Whatever the message is, once those events happen, our brain takes away a message, and then it causes some sort of an emotional response in us. Because if you look at the word emotion, if you just chop off the E, it's motion. So your brain is trying to get you to do something based on past events to try to prevent them or fix them. And so if we just can get curious enough to say, okay, if I'm trying to figure out why do I do what I do in the present, what are some of the patterns over the years that might contribute to this belief that's driving my motion?
I really love that you put, so you have E, you drop the E, you have motion, because movement is often key in regulating our nervous system.
Oh yeah.
So I love that you phrase it that way. That's really good.
Yeah, we've got to move our bodies. Like you cannot change your mind. You can't change your thoughts unless you change your body. So let's take anger, since we were already talking about that. You are not going to overcome anger by just sitting here. You got to get up and do something. Because even if you get up and take a walk, it's at least going to trick your brain into thinking that you're doing something. Like back to, excuse me, I'm getting over a cold here. Can't get rid of the cough though. Back to this idea that our brain is trying to keep us safe. If it wants us to go into anger mode, it feels like there's a threat that we have to fight. Like most people have heard of fight, flight, or freeze. And so if there's a bear in the woods, you might have to fight this bear, and you're going to need anger in order to fight it effectively. So our brain gets confused and thinks that some sort of an argument with a human is also a threat. And it might shoot us into anger for that reason too, because it sees it as a threat. And we're probably not going to be able to just sit there and twiddle our thumbs and say, okay, I'm not angry. I'm not angry. I just need to, hey, let me take a walk. I don't want to say something that I don't mean. Just if I take a 30-second walk, a lot of times your brain thinks, okay, he's listening to us and he's doing something physical to represent the idea of fighting or running away. And then it'll chill out so that you can get back into your logic brain. Because that's the key. If we can stay in our logic brain, or at least get back into it quickly, then we can respond and actually build the connection with somebody rather than building that divide.
I can tell you some of the experiences that I've had that led me into therapy. The culmination happened when I was working crime scene. And I'll leave it to everybody's imagination on what you might see in crime scene and the impact of that.
Yep.
But what it really started to impact me was the notes that get left behind from people. And you read them, it's, I'm not enough, I'm not good enough, I'm not smart enough, I'm not capable, or I've done something so egregious, I'm never going to be loved again, or never going to be forgiven. And in those experiences, you find pieces of yourself in each of these stories of, I've felt that, I've gone through that, I've had that experience, I felt that emotion. I've seen this in other people. I've gone through that exact experience. And it just opened all these different doors for me.
Yep.
Where all of a sudden I was tapping into things that occurred in childhood and adolescence and young adulthood. And ultimately it turned into this profound grief that I didn't even know that I had. And what an amazing experience to have that be what opens up for you. And then to get to a point where you start to release that grief from all these different experiences that you had. you become this new human that is very different. And you tap into this brand new level of empathy that you've never had before, because you start seeing all the people in your life, the experiences that you had, good or bad, or how whatever meaning that you gave to it way back when, but you see them very differently. So this is me encouraging people that, yes, it's okay to go to therapy. And if it's for you, that's great. That's wonderful. And there's also some other methods and means that a lot of therapists have navigated to as well, which is coaching.
Yeah, coaching for sure. And the way I describe therapy is it's an oil change for your brain. You wouldn't drive your car around for 5 years without changing the oil. So just go in, and even if it's not with a therapist, at least have a friend that you can just dump it all out, dump all the junk out of your brain, just like bad oil, and just let everything get put back in and checked up on just to see if everything's running the way it's designed to run. You don't have to wait until there's a crisis to go to therapy. It's, in fact, much better if you go once, twice a year, even if things are circumstantially fine. But at least you're checking on your thought patterns. You're checking to see if there's stuff stuck in your body. Like emotions are just chemicals, for example. So if we don't really check in with our body and see if there's places of like tension or any other sort of some sensation that's out of order, it might not bother us for a while, but eventually it's going to explode like a volcano. And so if we're regularly checking in with a therapist or at least a friend that can help us really unpack stuff, we can avoid the massive explosion and get ahead of that.
Yeah, which also goes back to the very beginning of this episode. Why not set up a time to meet with your friends once a week to have these types of conversations and really build that trust with other people?
Yeah, we need that so much. And you talked about grief, and that I'd say 70% of the people who come to me, they've got some sort of grief going on. Like I mentioned, the guys in their early 20s, they are grieving all the stuff that they're used to, the old friends, the old way of life, that kind of thing. With the stuff that you've dealt with as a first responder, that has to be grieved. Anytime that a guy especially has just gone quiet or gone numb and seems to be just going through the motions, I immediately know, all right, something's in there that needs to be grieved. Because grief really is part of the reason that somebody gets sad or depressed. If you look at the grief cycle, I wish I could somehow pull up a sign that shows it, but the grief cycle, you start out, you're at your baseline, and then you dip. You're going through the denial of things, the bargaining phase, the anger phase, and you finally get to that rock bottom moment of like, all right, I'm powerless here. I can't change this. I have to actually grieve that this happened and I can do nothing about it. And then you can start coming back up out of that pit, back to your baseline. But grief is really just a matter of letting your brain catch up to reality. Like we think of grief as mainly when somebody dies, and that is a massive way that is a massive thing that needs to be grieved. But it's also when something massive changes, or when you've got a major loss, like you get fired or you go through a divorce or a breakup. Any of those things, a death, a loss, a change, they have to be grieved because your brain, it doesn't just immediately catch up to what's real. It's holding back. So that can't be real. This is still real over here. And so grief is just slowly letting your brain catch up to and actually accept, which is the whole acceptance phase of grief, to accept, yeah, this is reality now. And it doesn't happen in a moment. And a lot of people, especially a lot of guys, we get stuck in that grief and don't even know that's what's going on.
Yeah. For first responders, it'll look like this. You get home and you stay in your driveway for about 15 minutes before going inside the house. We call that a clue. You should probably pay attention to that.
Yes, it's a big clue.
Now, you did speak to life pivots there, and I think it's important to at least acknowledge this a little bit more, just because so many people right now are in that state of losing their jobs. We've seen it with the thousands of people that are being laid off and the introduction of AI and the potential for that for additional job loss. How can we begin to help people navigate that pivot in their life?
A really practical thing is mentors. And this can start with just career mentors if you want, but I would also highly recommend somebody get a mentor that has more access to your life than just a career, and get multiple mentors if you can. But if you can get somebody in your life who's just been through it, and maybe they haven't been through the exact same thing you have, but they've been through their version of hell or a layoff, and just ask them, hey, tell me your story. What'd you do when your version of this happened? And I guarantee you they'll have two categories for you. They'll have a category of things that I'm glad that I did, and then they'll have a category of here's what I wish I hadn't done. And so often those are the things that the wisdom, the gems that we can really take is, yeah, we have general practices for what to do for when a layoff happens or anything like that. But very rarely does somebody say, or does you rarely see like a Instagram post that says 3 things not to do when you get laid off. That doesn't get really covered. But if you have a mentor who's been through it, he's like, all right, here's the mistakes I made. So hopefully you can avoid them. So that's one thing I'd say as just a practical step, but also whether you're going through a layoff or you have the most seemingly secure job in the world, I would start just ask myself, who am I? Because especially guys, when we meet each other, what's the first question we usually ask? What do you do?
What do you do?
Exactly. So it's just ingrained in who we are. We're meant to be providers, protectors. So our job becomes such a almost inextricable part of our identity, and it needs to be a part of our identity. But if we were to lose that job, then who am I? If I was a plumber, but then I got laid off, now what am I? If God didn't just have me created and say, all right, here's Trey the plumber. This is my whole plan for his life. No, I'm more than just my job title. So it reminds me, there's a scene in a movie called Spider-Man Homecoming, and Spider-Man messes up. Iron Man's kind of his boss, mentor, whatever, and says, all right, you messed up. You disobeyed me. I'm taking your suit. And Spider-Man says, no, don't take my suit. If you take my suit, I'm nothing without this suit. And everybody has a suit, a Spider-Man suit. So what is my Spider-Man suit? What is yours? What is anybody's? Like, if that thing that if somebody took it away, I feel like I'd be nothing. That's the thing we got to hone in on, because usually it's a good thing. But if we've elevated it to the main thing, eventually that house is going to crumble.
It's brutal. I've gone through it
Hmm.
a couple times. There's that identity level shift that you have when you go through a job loss of something that you did for a number of years and you lived it day in and day out, working 8 to 16 hours a day. It's just a part of who you are.
Yeah.
And you do have to get to this place where you ask yourself the question, who am I? Where am I going? What am I doing? Why am I doing it? You take an inventory of all the skills that you have, you write it down, you spend time with it, and you begin to recognize that, wow, I'm actually capable and have had hundreds of hours of training on all these different topics, and this makes me valuable in all of these different places and spaces. And so you have to look for the crossover in the different industries that you can get yourself into. And yeah, it's going to take time and it takes effort. And if you need a coach or some guidance, look for that mentorship in your life. It exists, whether it's through a church group or through an online group, you can find it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And what you touched on there is critical, because whatever it is, whether it's a layoff or something like that, where you lose what you thought your identity was, it is going to hurt. Make no mistake. Even if you've done the most comprehensive work and you have a really strong identity, if you lose a job or something major gets taken from you, that is still going to hurt. So you don't fool yourself into thinking you can do so much work and know fully who you are that like you're just untouchable to pain or grief, because we're human. It's going to happen. But you can at least give yourself something solid to push against to get back up once you've gotten knocked down. But if you don't do that examination work of who am I and what's my purpose, because your purpose is greater than just your job. It might not even be connected to your job, but if you do that work, if you'll ask those tough questions, you've built this foundation for yourself so that when life knocks you down, you've got something to push against.
Yeah, you might just find that it cleared the path for something new, for you to be a more authentic and whole version of yourself. Might not feel like it in the moment, but that's how all of this was created, right? I had a massive shift in identity, and I took that inventory, looked at my skills, and said, I can help people in this way and continue to be of service. And I continue to do that. And I don't see that changing anytime soon.
Yeah. And I bet, though, that even though now you've got good momentum, I bet in the moment, you didn't just immediately robotically say, okay, I'm going to be fine. I'm just going to do this. No. I'm assuming it was a tough path to get
there. There was, there's shame, there's guilt. You go through all of the emotions, because who am I without this thing that I had before? It's your paycheck, it's your health insurance, it's everything that keeps you feeling secure and stable and safe. And then you have this recognition that we're not always really safe and secure, even though it might feel like it in the moment. And that can change in a second.
Yeah. Yeah.
In a second.
And part of it, especially with the job that you were doing, is you were coming through for other people in a very physical, tangible way. And that's an innate desire in most men, is to come through for people. You were literally rescuing people and saving the day. And to lose that
it's a calling. And to say it doesn't fill you up when you do that would be a lie. You feel really good when you're able to do those types of tasks and to do it repeatedly over a long period of time. Again, it sneaks in there. It just becomes your identity. You don't mean for it to, which is why I always encourage people that are first responders, if that's the space that you're in, to make sure that you do have a friend group outside of the first responder community, that you're connected out in the outside world, and that you're hanging out with those people on a regular basis, because it's going to keep you more grounded and stable than the job will.
Yeah. And I would say, and you could tell me if I'm wrong, I would say it's going to make you better at your job, especially as a first responder. Because if your head's not clear in those moments, you're probably not going to make the clear decisions you need.
Like that friendship group that meets once a week, your people they see you as the person that you are, and not this persona, because they dive a little bit deeper, they scratch under the surface. So they're looking at you as a human. And so when they see that you're not connecting, that you're not available, that you're not open, that there seems to be a barrier between that connection with you and them, they call you out on it and they hold you accountable. And so that can be your early sign wake-up call that, oh, maybe something does need to shift. But other people that are in the first responder community, they're not going to notice it because they're really going through the same thing.
Yeah, that's true. And that, well, that's a whole other side topic we can get into later. That's good stuff. That's true wisdom right there. Hard fought wisdom, I would assume, as well.
Earned. Yeah, that earned wisdom. What role has social media played in the lives of young men today? Obviously, we're seeing a lot of different things with TikTok and impacting their mental health. Even in the search bar of that particular platform, there was a period of time where you would look up the search bar for men's mental health, and it was popping up with a variety of different things that were rather unfortunate. How can we help young men navigate social media a little bit better?
So there's no secret anymore. The more somebody consumes social media, it's literally like hand in hand. If you increase your social media use, you will increase your depression or anxiety. Like, no matter what age you are, what gender, it's going to happen. We all know it, and yet we keep using it. And I'm guilty of it as well. I try to put different limits on myself, but like, I can feel it if I'm on there a certain amount of time. It's like I'm entertained in the moment. And then there's also, I feel really, actually on a deeper level, I feel just dissatisfied and disgusted and just all the different words. So with men specifically, one of the biggest things that I've noticed is that social media makes worse this thought of I'm not good enough, specifically in the areas of money and appearance. And I'm talking specifically to young men here, but it affects all of us at any age. It's like the influencer who claims that he's gotten rich by 23 and he can tell you the steps to do it. A lot of the guys see that and they're like, I got to do that too. Otherwise I'm behind and everybody's going to think that I'm a loser. Like all these worst case scenarios, back to our survival brain, thinking something's going to kill us that's not. So part of it is we got to at least encourage them to have mentors who can help them sort out priorities in their lives, because if social media is their only mentor, they're just at the mercy of the algorithm. Same thing happens not just with money, but like I say, with appearances. There's just some people that they are blessed by God with the most divine looking physiques, and they eat Pop-Tarts and Cokes all the time. And
Yeah.
they work out, but that's it. And their body just looks like that. And somebody that's got a body type that's more of a linebacker type, they might look at that guy and think, what's wrong with me? There's nothing wrong with you. Your body's made for specific purposes too. This is not your identity. And yeah, be fit, but just know your value comes from somewhere else. And that's a journey that each guy has to figure out. Is like, why do I have value? Do I have value just because I can provide or look good, or is it deeper than that? So again, I think it goes back to those true relationships and the mentors and father figures.
Yeah, I've got the body of a Neanderthal. I just go along with it. Just is what it is.
Just embrace it with a beard.
Yeah, just. Now, what role does testosterone play in all this? Because we dive into the world of endocrine disruptors and all the different things that we're being exposed to. And we don't have to go deep down that rabbit hole at all. But I've had this impact me myself where I don't mind sharing it, but my testosterone got down to 163. And that's really bad. Could be up around 800 is what is generally accepted as regular testosterone for people. But I think the limit is like 300 at the low is what they say that you should have. But how is that impacting young men and boys today?
Yeah, so at this point, I'm passing on data that doctors have told me because I'm not a medical doctor, but I do love researching this stuff just in an anecdotal, amateur way. And experientially, as a therapist, I have I'm trying to think of the percentage of guys that I've sat with. If they come in talking about how they're tired, sad for no real reason, can't really get the passion for life they used to have. And I'm talking, this has happened a lot with guys 23, even 22, maybe even younger than that. These are just young guys that this shouldn't be happening to. Their body isn't aging that quick. And I could sit here and say, oh, let's figure out your mentality, your approach. I'm like, no, something's physically wrong. So I've sent them to get their test checked, and sure enough, it's low. It's in 200s, 300s. And by the way, doctors have told me this, the quote unquote normal range on the low end is way too low. That's just been adjusted because men's testosterone has continued to decline. So they've pulled the ranges down just to follow suit with that. But really, and I don't know the exact number, but I think it's closer to 800, like you're saying. So what we're calling normal in that 300 to 200 range, that's not actually normal. That might be average, but it's not what we're actually designed for. And yeah, the testosterone, not just physically and emotionally, but also just a quality of living out our purpose. Because if we've got the right amount of testosterone, we have a healthy amount of assertiveness or a healthy aggression to say, all right, I'm here for a reason, and I've got the fuel in the tank to drive out and do that thing and to accomplish that purpose. But if I don't have the test, I'm like, whatever, somebody else will handle it, or I'm comfortable watching social media or TV. But we could go all different directions with it. But long story short, I'm a huge proponent of somebody getting their testosterone at least checked. Even if you feel fine right now, at least have a baseline so that you can look 2 or 3 years in the future and say, okay, am I sticking to that baseline or am I declining? Because between the microplastics that we can't really do anything about and the foods that we eat that we can do some stuff about, our tests are being basically attacked. I'm not necessarily saying it's a conspiracy theory that we're being attacked, but there's a lot of factors that are taking down our test.
Yeah. Again, I've experienced this personally, and this isn't medical advice and everything's anecdotal because it's my experience, but I actually had to come off the testosterone and the HCG just because of the impact that it was having on me. There were some side effects that I was experiencing that weren't pleasant with the whole thing, which to me is really just a dosage issue at the end of the day. Yeah. But now that I've been off of it for over a month now, I feel pretty good. I feel great, other than there is a tiredness that goes along with that as well, which is, and some muscle wasting, which was also frustrating with that. So I say all that to say that you don't need to get on testosterone. That's not what I'm saying, because what you're often going to find is there's something else that's going on in the background that maybe your general practitioner probably isn't going to look for. Yeah. And that's really my next step right now, is to look for some other things that might be driving down the testosterone as opposed to going straight for the shots.
Yeah. And doctors don't necessarily look at all the testosterone numbers. They'll look at your total, but the free testosterone is really the key number to have it tested.
Yeah. So write that down, guys. You want to make sure that you get your free testosterone and your estradiol. You're going to have those numbers. So now we can't end this without diving into dating and relationships. Dating is a common source of frustration for many young adults. What are some of the biggest challenges young men are encountering in the current dating culture, including the role of dating apps?
Oh boy. All right. All kind of different pitfalls we could dive into here. But all right, if I could summarize this up, one thing I'm very thankful for is hookup culture is dying. And there's stats that prove that. And of course, people are still doing it. It's not like it's dead, but it is dying. It's definitely trending in the right direction. That alone, I think, is maybe the most tangible negative outflow of social media. Like, it's always been a thing, but social media has, I think, exacerbated it because it's highlighted that some of the women are becoming just as aggressive as men have been or have known to be in just looking for hookups only. And I think just by nature of, if one woman puts herself out there on social media as just looking for hookups only, then other girls see that and think maybe that's how I need to be. So it became this 50-50 thing where it used to be just the guys looking for it and the girls give it in. But for a while it became both the guys and the girls. But now people are seeing that it's just not what it promised it was going to give me. And it's just, I think it's 82% of women and 72% of men feel depressed and anxious after casual sex. 72% of men say they feel that way and 82% of women. And eventually you keep doing that. You're like, all right, I got to try something else. Nothing changes if nothing changes. So with dating apps, whether it's Tinder or other ways, you can use them and find whatever it is you're looking for. But you got to have a full vision of, why am I dating in the first place? Am I just dating to say that I have a girlfriend? Am I dating to have sex? Am I dating to impress friends? Or am I dating to actually prepare for marriage and look for a wife? And that's up to each person. I can't sit here and tell you what you or whoever should do, but if you don't have a vision for whatever it is you're doing, you're just going to get carried away by the current.
That's so good, and it's so true. And for everybody who's listening, check out the Diary of a CEO episode. It's one of the most recent ones. I don't have the episode number for you, unfortunately, but it should be easy to find. What is today? June 21st. So it'll be before June 21st, 2025. So go ahead and check that out. But you're absolutely right that intentions matter. And I also ask people, what are your goals, your values, and your standards for a relationship with you? Do you know what that is? Do you know your yeses and do you know your nos? And have you set that boundary with yourself?
Yep.
I think we get confused with boundaries a lot of the times because we think we're setting it with the other person, but in reality, you're setting it with yourself. Am I wrong in saying that?
You're absolutely right. A boundary is what you are willing to tolerate, not what you're trying to get somebody else to do or not do. And here are the things I'm willing to tolerate. And honestly, I talked to one of my friends who's a baseball coach, and this is applicable on the field and just in life in general. Whatever happens on a baseball field is either coached or tolerated. And then whatever happens in your life, essentially, if you're around people regularly, you're either tolerating it or you're encouraging them to do it, either to you or around you. So you got to decide, what do I want? What's my standard for friends, for coworkers, for wives, for spouses, whatever. So you're absolutely right.
And then, do you think Gen Z is going to end up with AI girlfriends? Or guys? I know you saw the post on it. I saw that. I'm like, oh God, here we go.
Yep. There's these robots out there, and I don't know how soon they'll be hitting the market, but I can't imagine it's going to be actually a highly popular thing. Because again, people can see what's real and what's actually fulfilling. And I think it'll be more of a novelty than anything else.
Did you ever see Demolition Man?
No, I've heard about it though.
You got to watch that. It's an old movie, but so a lot of the old movies are coming true in present day. And with Demolition Man, they had a scene where they had that VR headset where they're having intercourse through the VR headset. And it's like reminiscent of just all the things that we'll do other than to have a relationship with somebody where we actively communicate and are authentically ourselves. And we witness one another and we don't reject each other and we go through hard times and we make that a part of our life. And unfortunately, it just seems like we'll do everything in our power to avoid that.
Yep. It takes risk. It takes pushing through the risk. And we push through risk in other areas, so we know we have what it takes. We just got to remind ourselves that we have it.
Was there anything that you wanted me to ask you today that I didn't touch on?
No, we covered so much fun stuff. I think there's probably plenty we could come back and do separate episodes on. So I'd love to talk to you again, but this was awesome. Thank you for having me.
Trey, tell everybody how to find you and work with you.
Rugged Counseling on any of the platforms. I do a podcast as well. It's not as good as Jason's here, but I'm learning. I'm trying to get better. So he and I are in the fight alongside each other. So yeah, Rugged Counseling, whatever platform you got.
So Trey's lying. His podcast is awesome. I've listened to it. It's really good. There's a lot of great information in there. And then I also heard that you're writing a book.
Yeah, that one it's going to come out in spring of 26, so it's still a long ways off. I've learned the hard way how slow the publishing industry works, so I'm working hard on it now, and I'll just have to exercise a little patience to see it pay off, hopefully.
And I keep hearing that from all the different authors that I have on the podcast. The other thing is the marketing process doesn't always go as planned or as it should.
Yeah,
But since you're way out on that, maybe you can tap into that and take a look.
I'll do my best.
Yeah. All right, brother. Thanks for coming on the show. I greatly appreciate it.
Right back at you.